we often explore pretty serious figures and events here, but today we're taking a bit of a detour into the wonderfully unexpected.
Oh.
Yeah, with a character who's, well, a true original dogman. He's a crime-fighting hero, unlike any other, really.
Dogman. Yes. When you mentioned this, I was immediately intrigued. It's not every day our deep dive focuses on someone with such a, let's say, unique origin.
Exactly. And our guide for this, exploration is a review of the very first Dogman graphic novel, Dogman #1.
Okay.
So the mission today for everyone listening is to really unpack this book, figure out what makes this character and these stories just so incredibly popular, especially with kids.
Right. It's clearly struck a chord.
It really has. And
Yeah.
it feels like it's more than just, silly drawings. There's a real connection happening.
Absolutely. And the review we're looking at, it rightly points to the creator, Dav Pilkey.
Yes.
Now, that name probably rings a bell for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Captain Underpants, right?
That's the one. So right away, you kind of know you're in for something playful, imaginative, probably a bit cheeky.
Definitely sets expectations for that kind of humor.
Yeah.
Pilkey's got a real knack for it.
He does. Taps into that kid-friendly vibe that's just like a little bit rebellious in a good way.
Yeah.
And this Dogman book, it adds another layer, the review highlights, that the book isn't just by Pilkey.
Oh.
It's presented as a comic created by George Beard and Harold Hutchins, the kids from Captain Underpants.
Oh, that's brilliant.
They is
It's meta.
totally meta.
So it's not just about Dogman. It's framed as being
Yeah.
by these characters, filtered through their wonderfully unpolished kid perspective.
Exactly. It immediately signals this is going to be fun, imaginative, definitely not stuffy, like getting a story straight from a kid's brain.
I love that framing. Okay, so where do we start? The beginning.
Let's dive right into the origin, because honestly, it's pretty wild.
I bet.
So the review talks about this unlikely accident.
Yeah.
It involves a police officer, Officer Knight, and his dog, Greg.
Okay, the classic heroic duo, cop and his canine partner.
Right. Dedicated officer, brave canine, ready for danger. Pretty standard setup, actually.
Which I suppose makes what comes next even more unexpected.
Precisely. Because danger does arrive in the form of an explosion.
And the villain.
The culprit is none other than Petey, described as a nefarious feline villain.
A cat, of course.
Mhm.
Perfect antagonist for a dog hero. Playful.
Right. Good versus evil, but with a cartoonish twist, sets up the conflict clearly.
And the choice of a cat villain is quite smart, isn't it? Leans into that whole Tom and Jerry kind of dynamic, less serious menace.
Totally. Now, brace yourself. This is where it gets properly weird.
Okay, I'm ready.
Both Officer Knight and Greg are badly injured in this explosion, like critically.
Oh, dear.
And the solution, well, the review calls it a groundbreaking surgical procedure, and I'm using air quotes here because it's just so wonderfully absurd.
Yeah.
They end up attaching Greg's head, the dog's head, onto Officer Knight's body.
Wait, really? The dog's head on the human body?
That's Dogman.
Wow. Okay, so you've got the human cop's experience, his intelligence, fused with what the dog senses, loyalty.
Exactly. It's this blend. Human intelligence and bravery plus canine loyalty and those amazing senses. It's out there.
It really is. But it immediately makes you wonder, how does that even work? How does he fight crime? How does he just exist?
Well, that's the core of the character, isn't it? That duality. The review touches on it.
The human side and the dog side constantly interacting.
Yeah. He embodies both. The human smarts, the bravery, and the dog senses, the loyalty. It's like the ultimate crime fighter package, just achieved in the most ridiculous way possible.
And that contrast, that sort of inherent conflict between human and canine, that must create some great comedy.
Oh, absolutely. The review gives examples. Like 1 minute, he might be totally distracted by someone throwing a ball. Classic dog.
Huh.
But the next minute, his police training just kicks in and boom, he's expertly taking down criminals.
So it's that constant switch, that back and forth.
Exactly, between his two natures. That seems to be where a lot of the humor comes from. And his charm, strangely, makes him kind of relatable in a very exaggerated way.
It does, actually.
Yeah.
We all have those conflicting impulses, right? Instinct versus training. He just wears it on the outside, literally.
Right. And you can't have a hero like that without a memorable villain. So, Petey the cat, what are his schemes like in this first book? The review mentioned a couple that sounded, well, imaginative.
Imaginative is definitely the word. One of his big plans involves unleashing this giant, uncontrollable vacuum cleaner on the city.
A giant vacuum cleaner. Seriously.
Seriously. I mean, talk about an absurd threat. It feels like something pulled straight from a kid's playtime, just pure, over-the-top chaos.
That's amazing. And what was the other one? Something about books.
Ah, yes. An intellectually disruptive ray gun.
Okay.
It erases words from books, all the books, causing, and this is the best part, what the review calls Supa dumbness.
Supa dumbness.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Isn't it? It's quite clever, though. Targeting words, the basis of knowledge, and Supa dumbness is just such a perfect, childlike concept for the consequence.
It really speaks to a kid's view of what's important, what would be genuinely terrible. Which leads us right into Pilkey's style, doesn't it?
It does. The review really emphasizes his signature comedy. The puns, the visual gags, that lighthearted absurdity we know from Captain Underpants. It's his trademark.
It really is. He's just not afraid to be completely silly. And that's why kids love it, I think.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's this pure sense of fun, no pretension. It makes reading feel like, well, playing, not homework. It validates the kind of humor kids actually find funny.
And the pictures, the illustrations are so key.
Oh, yeah.
The review points out they're intentionally simple, almost like a kid drew them.
All right. Because George and Harold are supposed to be the creators. It all ties back to that meta thing.
Exactly. The art isn't meant to be polished or technically amazing. It's part of the joke.
Reinforces that whole kids telling their own story vibe. Complete with, their own drawing style, wild ideas.
Yeah.
It makes it feel more real, more accessible for young readers, maybe drawing their own stuff at home.
Totally. And we have to mention the Flip-O-Ramas. The review specifically calls them out as interactive.
Ah, the Flip-O-Ramas.
And you explain those for anyone listening who hasn't encountered them.
Oh, they're genius. They're these little sections in the book, usually 2 pages.
Right.
And you quickly flip one page back and forth against the other, and it creates this short little animation, like a mini action sequence.
Brings it to life right on the page.
Exactly. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Adds this dynamic, almost movie-like element. Extra engagement, visual humor. Kids love it. Makes reading more tactile, more playful. Like mini flip books inside the main book.
Such a clever trick. Breaks up the reading, injects movement, shows Pilkey really gets how to keep kids hooked, actively involved.
Oh, definitely. No, it's interesting. Beyond all the silliness, the vacuum cleaners and whatnot, the review also mentions some genuinely positive underlying messages. Things like empathy, kindness, perseverance. How do those come through amidst all the chaos?
That's a really good question, I think. I think it's because Dogman himself, despite everything, the weird origin, the goofy situations, he's always portrayed as fundamentally good.
Okay.
He's always trying to do the right thing, even if his dog instincts sometimes, lead him astray hilariously. That basic goodness, that commitment, it anchors those positive messages.
That feels important for children's books, doesn't it? The humor grabs them, sure, but the values underneath give it staying power.
Right.
Dogman's loyalty, his drive for justice, even against ridiculous odds. It subtly models good behavior without being, preachy.
And the review also noted the focus on the human-animal bond. Loyalty, unconditional love, which, given Dogman is literally a human-canine hybrid.
Yeah, that theme is kind of baked right in, isn't it?
Yeah.
He is that bond embodied.
So
His dog instincts often drive the heroism. His loyalty to his friends is solid. It's a celebration of that connection, the best of both worlds, maybe.
let's circle back quickly to that meta-narrative. George and Harold creating the comic, because the review suggests that's really key to the whole thing working.
So?
Well, their commentary, their artistic choices, it apparently really ramps up the humor. It's not just the story, it's how they're telling it.
Ah, I see. So they're little side comments. They're maybe not quite right explanations.
Exactly. Even the review points out deliberate grammatical errors and misspelling.
Oh, that's great.
It all adds another layer of comedy, right? It makes it feel genuinely like it's from a kid's perspective, like we're peeking into their creative process.
Which is naturally funny and engaging. And those errors, the misspellings, that reinforces the childlike view, makes it feel authentic.
I think so. It's not about perfect grammar. It's about capturing that childhood energy, that imagination running wild.
Makes it less intimidating for young readers, too, maybe, who are just learning to read and write themselves. Like, hey, it's okay if it's not perfect.
Good point. Okay, so this all sounds great. Fun premise, clever framing, good messages. But how did it actually do when it came out? What was the reaction?
Well, according to the review, the reaction was pretty fantastic. Huge enthusiasm right from the start.
Just from kids.
Not just kids, interestingly. The review highlights its popularity with educators and parents, too. which says a lot, I think.
Yeah, that suggests they saw real value in it, beyond just the laughs.
And the review specifically mentions its ability to make reading fun and accessible, especially perhaps for kids who find reading a bit of a struggle.
That's huge, isn't it? Getting reluctant readers engaged.
It really is. Sometimes all it takes is that bit of silliness, the engaging visuals, a story that doesn't feel like schoolwork,
Right.
to unlock that love of reading. If they're laughing, they're turning pages, building positive associations with books.
And reviewers apparently praised the originality and the humor, said it felt fresh.
Yes, that comes through strongly. It wasn't just another kid's book. It offered something genuinely different.
What do you think made it feel so original? Was it just the weird premise?
I think the premise was a big part of it, sure.
Yeah.
Bughead, cop body. It's instantly memorable, inherently bizarre.
Yeah.
But it's also how that premise is used, the meta-narrative, Pilkey's specific brand of humor, those visual tricks like the fliporamas. It was a whole package of unexpected stuff.
A winning formula, apparently, because the review makes it clear this first book kicked off a massively popular, still-running series.
Absolutely. Dogman clearly struck a major chord. The fact that it spawned so many sequels shows it really captured kids' imaginations and kept them coming back. Real staying power.
Okay, so let's try and sum up, pulling it all together from the review. What are the absolute key ingredients to this book's success?
Well, number one has to be that imaginative, inherently funny premise. Dogman himself.
Right, the core concept.
Then the constant stream of silly antics, the laugh-out-loud humor, just pure fun.
Yep.
And third, maybe surprisingly, those underlying positive messages. Goodness, loyalty, trying your best.
And we definitely can't forget the unique framing device, George and Harold as the creators.
Oh, absolutely crucial. That adds so much to the comedy and the charm.
Yeah.
Like, we're in on the joke with them.
Yeah. And then layer on the engaging, simple style illustrations and those interactive fliporamas. It all just clicks together into this really enjoyable, memorable reading experience.
It's a multifaceted thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Clearly hit the sweet spot for its audience.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it seems there's quite a bit more to Dogman than meets the eye. It's not just jokes and weirdness.
No, there's a real understanding of kids, a clever structure, and actually quite a bit of heart mixed in with the absurdity.
A powerful reminder, maybe, of how imagination works and the appeal of stories that just make you laugh.
Definitely. And the fact that it gets kids reading, especially kids who might be hesitant, that's a pretty big deal in children's literature.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave everyone listening with. What does the huge ongoing success of a character like Dogman, this, wonderfully strange hybrid, really tell us about what clicks with readers, especially young readers? Is it just the pure silliness, the escapism, or is there something maybe deeper about the goodness and loyalty he represents even in that bizarre package?
That's a really interesting question to ponder. Maybe it's the perfect storm of both. The silly gets him in the door, but the heart keeps him there.
Could be.
Well, if this look at the first Dogman book has sparked anyone's interest, I'd definitely say check out the series, see how it all evolves. You might find quite a surprising amount to enjoy in those wonderfully silly pages.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're cracking open Dogman Unleashed. It's the second book in Dav Pilkey's, super popular Dogman series.
Right, big series.
Yeah. We've got a book review here, and our plan, our sort of mission, is to look past the easy laughs, maybe, and really dig into why this book clicks with kids, why it's so big, and what it says about, children's books now.
Exactly. We want to get at the core stuff. What makes it work, why kids love it, and, its place in the whole kidlit landscape.
Okay.
And we should probably remember up front this whole Dogman thing. It's supposed to be written and drawn by George and Harold.
Oh, right. From Captain Underpants.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you've got that extra layer, that meta thing going on right away. It's kind of a playful.
Okay, so let's dive in then. What's the basic setup for Dogman Unleashed? The review says it picks right up.
It does, yeah. Jump straight in after book one. You've got Dogman, obviously.
Our hero, part dog, part man.
Right. Doing his best, trying to keep the city safe in his very unique way. But the real engine for this story...
His Petey the cat. He's back.
Ah, the arch nemesis returns.
He does, and let's just say he hasn't exactly turned over a new leaf.
Okay, Petey's back. Always need a good villain, right?
Yeah.
So what's his big plan this time? What's Petey up to in Unleashed?
Well, the review talks about his ambition. It's pretty big, for a cat.
Uh-huh.
His goal is stated pretty clearly. He wants to be the world's most evilest cat.
The evilest, huh? Okay.
Yeah. And the ways he tries to get there. The review calls them imaginative and absurd.
Imaginative and absurd. I like that. Not just like stealing tuna then.
Oh, definitely not. We're talking bigger scale mischief here.
Okay, give us an example. What kind of absurd are we talking?
Okay, so one of the big ones the review mentions, Petey makes this enormous hot dog.
A hot dog.
A giant self-operating hot dog,
Yeah.
and it just, like, terrorizes the city.
Wait, a giant hot dog is just rolling around causing trouble?
Pretty much. Imagine
Yeah.
seeing that. Just pure chaos. What do you think makes that kind of image so funny to kids? Oh, it's brilliantly silly, isn't it? That total unexpectedness. Kids just eat that stuff up.
Mm-mm.
Okay, what else? Any other evil schemes?
He also comes up with this device. Its only job is to make everyone talk gibberish.
Gibberish, like nonsense words.
Exactly. The review talks about the massive confusion it causes, all the misunderstandings. Think about trying to get through your day when no one can understand anyone else.
That's just pure anarchy. It's like tapping into that kid fantasy of what if all the rules just disappeared?
Right. Total communication breakdown.
So you've got giant hot dogs, citywide gibberish. How does Dogman handle all this? How does he save the day?
Well, Dogman's approach, according to the review, it's this great mix of his human side and his dog side.
Okay.
It mentions clever detective work. You can just picture him sniffing around, right?
Totally. Using his nose for clues.
Yeah, that and also his physical prowess, plus that really strong loyalty, very dog-like.
I love that. The review points out that a lot of the humor comes from that contrast, right? Between him acting like a cop and acting like a dog.
Absolutely. It's inherently funny. You've got this police officer, human body, dog head, dog instincts.
Yeah.
So you get these moments where he's like seriously investigating and then suddenly, boom, a squirrel runs by and he's completely distracted.
Or he needs to play fetch, like right now.
Exactly. That clash between the serious job and the pure dog instinct, it's unpredictable. And I think kids find that really funny and maybe even a bit freeing.
That makes total sense. It's playing with expectations. Now, the review mentions something maybe a bit deeper about Petey. Subtle character development.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Even with all the silliness.
Right.
The book apparently gives these little glimpses under Petey's evil exterior. The review says it subtly explores the complexities of his character.
Complexities in Petey.
Yeah, hinting at underlying motivations, why he does what he does. And it even mentions a glimmer of potential for change.
Huh. So maybe he's not just pure evil bad guy.
Seems like it. Why do you think adding that little bit of nuance, even in a funny kids book, might work?
Well, maybe it makes him, I don't know, slightly more real, less of a cartoon, and it leaves the door open for later stories, maybe.
Could be. Makes him a bit more interesting than just being bad all the time.
Okay, let's swing back to the humor. That's obviously huge for Dogman. What's the style like in this book? Dav Pilkey's signature stuff.
Oh, yeah. The review says it's full force. Lots of silly puns. Kids love those.
They do.
And plenty of visual gags and slapstick comedy. It's very physical humor, very direct, like old cartoons almost.
And the pictures are key to that, right? The review said they're meant to look like George and Harold drew them.
Exactly. They're deliberately simple, really expressive. It makes the jokes land better visually.
Okay.
And making it look like George and Harold style just pulls you into that whole meta idea, makes it feel really accessible, like maybe you could draw this comic.
Like your friends made it. And what about the flipporamas? People love those. What are they?
Yeah. The flipporamas are genius. They're basically built into the book. You flip certain page corners really fast, back and forth, and it creates this little animation, like a mini movie of the action.
Oh, that's cool. So it makes reading more interactive.
Totally. It adds this hands-on element, makes the story literally move. What do you think that adds for a kid reading it?
It makes it feel active, not passive, like you're part of making the action happen. Probably keeps them hooked, makes it feel more dynamic than just words on a page.
Spot on. Now, the review also says it's not just jokes. There are some positive things mixed in.
Yeah, like what?
Well, it mentions things like the importance of friendship, loyalty, and forgiveness. These ideas kind of weave through the story subtly.
So kids are laughing at the talking hot dog,
Right.
But they're also picking up on stuff about being a good friend, maybe forgiving people. That's clever.
It is. Sneaking in the good stuff. The review even says the book gently encourages readers to consider different perspectives and the potential for redemption.
Which links back to Petey, right? And that potential for change we talked about.
Exactly. It's fostering a bit of empathy alongside the laughs.
Okay, let's go back to George and Harold for a sec. That whole meta-narrative, how does that keep showing up in Unleashed?
It's definitely still a big part of it. You get their little comments in the margins. Sometimes they argue about the plot.
Really?
Yeah, or they explain their, quote, artistic choices. It's like having these two goofy kids giving you a running commentary.
It makes it feel really collaborative almost, like you're sharing the joke with them.
Totally. And the review mentions the spelling and grammar mistakes, too.
Oh, yeah. They're deliberate.
Very deliberate. It makes it feel even more like it was actually made by kids in elementary school. It adds to the humor and that authentic kid creator feel.
It sounds like a really unique package. So how did Man Unleashed do when it came out? Did it keep the momentum going?
According to this review, yeah, big time. Enthusiastic praise. It kept the series flying high.
Critics liked it. Kids liked it.
Seems like both. They loved the humor. The story kept them reading. The characters were still, charming.
And the review makes a point about reluctant readers, doesn't it? That these books are good for them.
Yes, that's highlighted. The idea that the combination of the visuals, the fast pace, the genuine laughs, it can really pull in kids who might normally find reading a bit of a drag.
That's huge. Showing them books can actually be fun.
Exactly. It can be a gateway, potentially fostering that love of reading long term.
A really important aspect. So, wrapping up the review's main points, what's the final verdict on Man Unleashed?
Basically, the review concludes it totally succeeded. It built on the first book, gave readers another adventure that was both hilarious and heartwarming.
Heartwarming, too. Interesting.
Yeah. And it really cemented Dogman's place, made readers excited for whatever came next.
So it's the whole package, then. Not just silly fun, but humor mixed with messages about friendship, maybe even a redemption. All in this format that makes reading feel easy and enjoyable, framed by George and Harold.
You got it. It shows Dav Pilkey really understands his audience, how to make them laugh, how to create characters they care about, and how to slide in some decent life lessons without being preachy.
This was great, really getting into the nuts and bolts of why Man works. It's clearer now why these books connect so strongly.
Absolutely. It's smart storytelling even when it looks simple. It entertains, but also maybe subtly shapes things a bit.
So, a final thought for everyone listening. Think about those stories from your childhood, the ones that mix the funny with the heartfelt. Why do those often stick with us? Is there maybe some real value in looking closely at seemingly simple stories like Man to find deeper insights? Something to chew on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
You know how sometimes you just want the core of something fascinating, but without spending hours wading through it.
Yeah, totally. Time is short.
Exactly. You've got a ton on your plate. You want to get smart fast. Well, that's exactly what we're doing today. We're plunging into the world of Man.
Oh, great series.
Yeah, specifically zeroing in on the third book, A Tale of Two Kitties. And we're basing this on a really insightful review you shared.
That's right. Think of this as your express ticket, Understanding why the series resonates so strongly and what makes this particular book tick.
Right.
We're not just summarizing. We're pulling out the key insights and the really entertaining part so you get the essence without the full read-through.
Perfect. And for anyone maybe just discovering Man, the books are presented as being written by George Beard and Harold Hutchins.
Yeah, the Captain Underpants kids.
Those legendary pranksters.
Yeah.
So you kind of know going in you're in for some silliness. And A Tale of Two Kitties really ups the ante with a pretty wild premise for Man.
Oh, absolutely. The main hook here is kind of nuts. Man, half dog, half cop.
Right.
He suddenly finds himself as this reluctant dad to clones of his archenemy, Petey the cat.
Wow, okay. Clones.
Yep, two of them, Lil Petey and ADHD. It's just this perfect setup for exploring stuff like friendship, responsibility, and just a ton of hilarious situations, all with that classic Dav Pilkey humor.
Okay, so Man as a dad, that's quite a concept. When you first came across that in the review, what really jumped out at you?
Well, what's fascinating is the immediate conflict, right? You've got this inherently good guy suddenly stuck caring for mini versions of his worst enemy.
Little villains in training.
Pretty much. The review really painted a picture of how Lil Petey and ADHD, even though they're small and maybe, innocent in their intent, they definitely inherit Petey's talent for chaos. Think like glitter everywhere, household stuff getting wrecked, but amplified by tiny paws.
So Man's beat isn't just bad guys anymore. It's spilled milk and crayon masterpieces on the walls.
Exactly. And the review pointed out how Dogman, even though he might not be thrilled at first,
Understandably.
yeah, he steps up. He becomes this guardian. The review used the phrase reluctant but ultimately loving, which I think really nails it. He's facing these tests to his patience, his whole understanding of what it means to care for these unpredictable little creatures, but through it all, he finds the real rewards in that connection too.
Sounds wonderfully chaotic. But the review also mentioned something I found kind of surprising, actual character growth for Petey himself. How does that fit in with all the kitten craziness?
That's a really key part of this book, actually. While Petey definitely keeps some of his, mischievous side,
Of course.
the review highlighted this developing sense of remorse he has for his past actions. And even more interesting is this sort of budding desire for change, especially when he interacts with his clones.
Huh. So maybe he's not all bad.
Well, it raises that question, doesn't it? Can even the most notorious villains find a different path? It adds this unexpected emotional depth.
So we're seeing the supervillains soften up a bit. Did the review give any hints about why? What's sparking that change?
The review sort of hinted that seeing these mini-me's and maybe seeing how Dogman is caring for them,
Okay.
it sparks something in Petey. It's not like a switch flips, it's more gradual, a stirring of something different. And if you think about the bigger picture, it suggests that maybe even in characters who seem, irredeemable, there might be potential for growth, especially when they face weird circumstances or maybe get shown a bit of kindness.
That does add a layer you might not expect in a kid's comic known for being funny.
Right. Which brings us to how they balance it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Balancing that laugh out loud humor with real character stuff. How does the book, based on the review, actually manage that?
Well, a big part of it, as the review stressed, is just Dav Pilkey being a master of humor. You've got constant visual gags, those puns that make you groan but kids adore.
Oh, yeah, the puns.
And just classic slapstick. It's like hitting you from all sides with comedy to keep you entertained.
And the drawings. They're so basic, almost like a kid did them, but they show so much.
Exactly. The review nailed that. The intentionally simple, really expressive style presented as George and Harold's work, it just perfectly matches the funny tone.
It really does.
It boosts the visual jokes and adds to that lighthearted feel. And we absolutely have to mention the fliporamas.
Oh, man, yes. Those little flipbook bits inside the pages. They're genius. So fun.
Aren't they? It's that interactive thing, plus the easy-to-get humor and the simple art. It makes the stories really grab you. But like the review said, don't let the silliness fool you.
Right, there's more going on underneath.
There are some surprisingly deep themes woven in there.
Okay, so beyond the laughs, what deeper messages did the review pick up on?
Well, it pointed to some pretty powerful stuff, like empathy, forgiveness.
Yeah.
The impact of just being a positive influence.
How does that come across?
Mostly through Dogman, his unwavering kindness and the incredible patience he shows with these chaotic kittens. It's a great example of unconditional love, really. Acceptance.
So it makes you think about how that kind of consistent goodness can affect things, even really tough situations.
Yeah, exactly. By showing Dogman being consistently good, the book is subtly teaching kids and adults probably about these big ideas.
Without being preachy, it sounds like.
Not at all. And the review suggested the book gently shows how, nurturing and steady guidance can actually change behavior. It can maybe steer even the naughtiest ones towards something better. It's quite a hopeful message inside all the fun.
It really is. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often maybe we underestimate the power of just being kind and supportive consistently.
Definitely something to chew on. Now, the review also talked about that meta-narrative thing.
Oh, right, the George and Harold angle. They're supposedly the creators. How does that feature in this story?
It's such a clever layer. The review mentioned their funny back and forth, their sometimes ridiculous creative choices that pop up.
Yeah, you see their little notes.
And their occasional interruptions. It just adds this whole other dimension of comedy, like you're getting a peek behind the curtain of them making the comic.
And the deliberate misspellings, the kind of childlike language in the narration, that's all part of making you believe George and Harold wrote it, right?
Exactly. It locks in that playful perspective, adds to the charm. And what's neat is how that framing doesn't just add humor, it maybe even encourages kids with their own storytelling, showing that even stuff that isn't perfect can be really fun and engaging.
That's a great point. So given all this, the humor, the heart, the meta stuff, it sounds like A Tale of Two Kitties really landed well. What was the critical take, according to the review?
Yeah, the review made it clear it was a big hit. Critics loved the heartwarming story, the nonstop funny bits, and importantly, the character development. especially Petey's.
Ah, so Petey's arc, that hint of redemption that really stood out to people.
It seems like it. The review suggested that managing to weave the broad comedy together with those more meaningful themes so smoothly, that's a big reason for its success. And it really helps cement Dogman as this beloved character.
So wrapping this part up, Dogman, A Tale of Two Kitties. It's definitely more than just silly drawings and jokes.
Oh, absolutely not just that. The review we looked at really shows how it's this smart mix of humor and real feeling. It offers some valuable thoughts on kindness, taking responsibility, and the idea that transformation is always possible. You see it in Dogman's journey into unexpected fatherhood and Petey's really interesting changes.
It sounds like it digs into these themes pretty well. Showing kindness, stepping up even when it's hard, and seeing that people or cats can change.
Precisely. And maybe a final thought to leave folks with, connecting it back. Think about those times in your own life, maybe unexpected challenges or dealing with people who seemed, I don't know, stuck in their ways. Does Dogman's whole experience with Lil Petey and ADHD offer maybe a different way to look at it? Could even the most chaotic situations hold these hidden chances for growth, for connection? Maybe that power of just steady, positive influence in our own tricky relationships, maybe it's bigger than we tend to think. So you want to get right to the heart of something, figure out what makes it important, but maybe without sifting through everything yourself.
Yeah, that's the idea. Cut right to the chase.
Exactly. And today, we're doing just that. We're taking a deep dive into Dav Pilkey's Dogman and Cat Kid,
which is the fourth book in that huge Dogman series. Lots to unpack there.
Definitely. And what's really interesting right off the bat is how it's framed. It's not just, a comic book handed to you.
No, it's presented as if it's made by George Beard and Harold Hutchins.
Yeah.
The guys from Captain Underpants.
Right, which immediately sets a certain, let's say, playful, maybe slightly zany tone.
Absolutely. Gives it that specific energy.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to pull out the core ideas, things about mentorship, creativity.
And those surprising relationships that pop up.
Yeah. Think of this as like your quick guide to understanding why Dogman and Cat Kid is significant. And a big part of that comes down to a new character taking center stage.
That's right. We get properly introduced, really, to Cat Kid. Lil Petey.
The clone of Petey, Dogman's big nemesis.
Exactly. And the book really zooms in on Dogman stepping into this, kind of unexpected role as a mentor to him.
Okay, let's dig into that. This whole mentor-mentee thing between Dogman and Lil Petey. From the last book, we know Dogman sort of took him in.
In his very unique Dogman way. Unconventional care, you might say.
Right. So how does that develop here? What's Lil Petey like as he, grows a bit?
Well, what's cool is seeing Lil Petey start to really form his own identity. He's not just mini Petey. He's got his own personality quirks.
And interests.
And interests, yeah. Big time. He sees George and Harold's comics and gets this idea. He wants to make his own comics.
Okay. So that adds a whole new layer, doesn't it? Dogman, who's, let's be honest, maybe not the most subtle guide.
He means well. But yes, subtle isn't his strong suit.
Trying to mentor this little kitten who suddenly has this burst of creative energy. How does Dogman handle that?
It's actually pretty funny and kind of sweet. Dogman tries to encourage him, but he also has these preconceived notions about what makes a good story.
I feel like it needs a moral.
What?
Or proper grammar, maybe. Which, coming from George and Harold.
Right. But Dogman tries to instill, positive themes, clear storytelling. So you get this tension. Lil Petey's wild imagination versus Dogman's sort of attempts at structure.
I can picture that. It must be tricky.
It really shows the challenges, but also the rewards of nurturing creativity, right? Letting someone be themselves while still offering some guidance. It's a balancing act.
Yeah, a real tightrope. And speaking of complicated characters, what about the original Petey? He's still around, still trying to be better.
He is. Petey's journey of self-discovery or attempted reform continues, and it takes a really interesting turn in this book.
How so? Does he interact with Lil Petey much?
He does. He actually becomes quite supportive, offering his own kind of advice to Lil Petey, which is, very different from Dogman's advice.
So they're like co-mentoring or maybe co-parenting in a weird cat and dog way?
That's a great way to put it. There's this developing bond between Dogman and Petey, kind of unexpected. They're united because they both genuinely care about Lil Petey.
That adds, wow, like an actual emotional depth to it all amidst the usual chaos.
It really does. It's surprisingly layered for a kid's comic known mostly for, silliness.
And there's plenty of silliness. Let's not forget the humor. That's core Dogman, right?
Yeah.
What's the comedy like here?
Oh, it's classic Pilkey. Nonstop. You've got your visual gags just everywhere. Puns that make you groan.
But also laugh. Admit it.
Okay, yeah, you laugh. And loves the slapstick. It's just funny, plain and simple. Works for kids, works for adults reading with kids.
And the art style plays a huge role in that, doesn't it? That very simple, expressive look, like kids drew it.
Exactly. It's meant to look like George and Harold's work. That simplicity makes it super accessible, easy to read.
But it also helps the jokes land, right? Like an over-the-top reaction drawn simply can be hilarious.
Precisely. It nails the comedic timing. And, of course, you have the...
Diploramas. Can't forget those.
You really can't. They're genius.
Yeah.
That little bit of, like, DIY animation on the page...
Yeah. It's interactive, gets you involved, adds that extra bit of visual fun.
Totally breaks the mold of just panel after panel. It's dynamic.
So we've got the mentor stuff, Petey's journey, the humor, the art.
Ow.
But underneath all that, there's some pretty solid themes being explored too, aren't there?
Absolutely. It's not just fluff. Pilkey weaves in ideas about creativity, quite strongly, actually. And individuality.
Yeah.
Being okay with being different.
How does that creativity theme play out, especially with Lil Petey starting his comics?
Well, through Dogman's struggle, really. He has to learn to appreciate Lil Petey's way of creating, even if it's messy or doesn't follow the rules.
Even if the grammar is creative.
Exactly. Lil Petey's comics are his. They're unique. And the book kind of nudges the reader, saying, hey, your way of creating stuff is valid, too. Find your own voice.
That's a pretty great message. It's about valuing the effort and the uniqueness.
For sure. It's subtle, but it's definitely there.
Okay, and we touched on George and Harold earlier, the authors. We need to talk about that meta-narrative aspect. It's pretty prominent.
Oh, yeah. They're not just credited. They're in it. Popping up with commentary, arguing about the plot.
Explaining why they drew something a certain way, usually in a ridiculous fashion.
Right. It's like a running commentary track from two hyperactive kids. It breaks the fourth wall constantly.
And that whole meta-narrative thing where the story knows it's a story adds another whole level of humor.
It does. And it also maybe gets young readers thinking about how stories are made. You know, the choices involved in telling a story or drawing a comic.
Plus the way they write with the intentional misspellings and kid-like grammar.
Yeah, that totally reinforces the idea that these two characters are behind it all. It adds to the charm, the authenticity of the concept.
So putting it all together, when this book, Dogman and Cat Kid, came out, how did people react? Was it a hit?
Oh, huge hit. Massive. It got really positive reviews. People loved the story. The humor was obviously a big draw.
And Lil Petey, did he land well?
Absolutely. He was a breakout character.
Yeah.
Really added that heartwarming element people connected with. Critics and readers praised the character development, especially his.
So it sounds like it succeeded in doing what the series does best, mixing that over-the-top humor with surprisingly meaningful stuff.
Exactly. It nailed that balance. It showed the series could evolve, introduce new dynamics like the mentorship, without losing its core appeal.
Okay, so let's wrap this section up. If we had to boil down the key takeaways from this deep dive into Dogman and Cat Kid, what are the main things to remember?
Well, first, definitely the introduction of Lil Petey. He's not just like a sidekick. He's crucial, a really charming central character.
Right, significant addition.
Second, the way it explores mentorship and how those bonds can form in really unexpected situations, like between a half-dog, half-cop, and a kitten clone.
And maybe his reformed villain father figure.
Right. Exactly, that whole dynamic. And third, just how Pilkey keeps managing to entertain like crazy while also sneaking in these themes, encouraging creativity, being yourselves, appreciating those mentor figures.
It's a clever mix, humor and heart.
Always. That's the magic ingredient, I think.
So to sum up our deep dive, Dogman and Cat Kid really doubles down on the series' strengths while introducing this compelling mentor-mentee plot with Lil Petey. We saw Petey evolve.
We talked about the signature humor, the art style, the fliporamas.
And those underlying themes of creativity and individuality, all wrapped up in that fun meta package from George and Harold.
A lot packed into one book.
Definitely. Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on.
Yeah, think about this. Where had you seen mentorship pop up in maybe unlikely places in your own life or world? It's not always the obvious teacher-student thing, right?
And building on Lil Petey's journey, what are some of the, let's say, unique or unconventional ways creativity shows up around you? Maybe even in your own work or hobbies, things that don't fit the standard mold.
Reflecting on that might just give you a new lens for seeing things. Like finding the genius in a slightly messy, misspelled comic book. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into Dav Pilkey's Dog Man, Lord of the Fleas. And listeners will know this one. It's the fifth Dog Man book, but it's framed, as a comic by George Beard and Harold Hutchins. From Captain Underpants, of course.
Exactly. And the setup here is just, well, it's pretty out there. We're talking about the city facing this infestation, but not just any infestation.
Right, not just regular fleas.
No, mutated fleas, huge, bizarrely smart, and capable of some really disgusting things.
Disgusting is definitely one word for it. I mean, you've got these fleas apparently big enough to lift cars, which is just
ridiculous.
Totally ridiculous, but also kind of alarming. And then the goo thing, some of them are spitting sticky, smelly goo.
Yeah, the goo, it's a whole different kind of threat for Dogman and the cops, not their usual, bank robbers.
No, this is like a citywide biohazard situation almost. And digging into it, you really see these themes pop up, like responsibility and Dogman having to face some weird fears.
And how it all started is pretty central, too. It wasn't some villain's master plan.
Right, it was kind of an accident, wasn't it?
Completely. So yeah, the city's under siege by these giant fleas. But, like you said, the origin story is key. It goes back to Lil Petey.
Cat Kid, yeah.
Right, Cat Kid by this point. And his scientific curiosity getting a little out of hand. He's working on a super growing serum.
Okay, his super growing serum. So, Cat Kid, he usually means well. He's probably just tinkering in his lab.
Tinkering is a good word for it. Yeah. He's got this serum, maybe for a science fair, maybe just because. The book's kind of vague on the why, but the what is clear. He spills it accidentally.
Yeah. Oh, boy. And it lands on
fleas, just ordinary fleas that happen to be nearby. And boom, instant, gigantic, mutated pests.
Wow. So that really brings up the whole responsibility angle, doesn't it? I mean, he didn't mean to unleash chaos.
Not at all.
But his actions, his experiment, directly caused this massive, sticky, citywide problem. He has to face that.
Yeah, and I think Pilkey handles that really well. It's not just a simple oops. It shows a kid grappling with, pretty big consequences from something unintended. It's messy.
Yeah, messy is right. Even in a funny book, that part feels kind of real.
Definitely.
So, okay, let's talk about Dogman himself. He's the hero, usually charges right in. But these fleas, they seem different for him.
They really are. And it's clever because it taps right into his basic nature, his dogness.
How so?
Well, think about dogs and fleas normally. It's an irritant, something instinctually bothersome. Now magnify that. Literally.
Ah, right.
His canine senses, usually his superpower for sniffing out trouble, they make him extra sensitive to this particular threat. The size, the smell, the flea-ness of it all, it's deeply unsettling for him.
So it's not just about being brave against a bad guy. It's like an internal battle against his own instincts, his own deep-seated aversion.
Exactly. It's visceral. He's genuinely freaked out, which is something we don't often see. He has to push past that revulsion to actually do his job.
Which must force him to get creative, right? You can't just chase these things like a regular crook.
For sure. He needs totally new tactics to fight an enemy that, literally gets under his skin.
Okay, but amidst all this, potential horror of giant bugs...
Yeah.
It's still a Dav Pilkey book. It's funny.
Oh, absolutely hilarious. The humor is key.
How does that come through? What kind of comedy are we seeing?
It's classic Pilkey slapstick, lots of visual gags. You get these huge fleas just bumbling around, causing chaos in really silly ways. And the attempts to catch them. Pure cartoon physics. Dogman trying to swat one that's the size of a truck. Or remember that bit where one gets stuck in the police station door?
Ah, yeah. Just wedged.
Exactly. Oh. And the character expressions, Dogman's look of just utter disgust is priceless. It leans into the absurdity.
And the art style helps there too, right? The whole George and Harold, we drew this vibe.
Totally. It's simple, it's super expressive, and it makes these potentially nightmare fuel creatures seem, sillier, more manageable. Comedically.
Yeah, it takes the edge off the grossness because it looks like a kid drew it. A kid who thinks goo is hilarious.
Precisely. It frames the whole thing through their slightly crude, imaginative lens. And then you have the fliporamas.
Oh, yeah. The fliporamas. Gotta love those. Little bits of animation right in the book.
Such a fun touch.
What do you think their main job is, narratively speaking, besides just being cool?
Well, I think they do a few things. One, they're just a fun little break, a quick interactive gag. Two, they really hammer home that meta idea. This is a comic by George and Harold. It feels like something they totally put in.
Yeah, definitely their style.
And three, they just add to the overall lightness. Even when things are chaotic with the fleas, you get this playful moment. keeps it from getting too heavy, even with the bug theme.
So, okay, we've got the big themes. Responsibility, facing fears, anything else hiding in there beneath the surface.
Yeah, I think there's also this subtle point about, like, how even small things can have a massive impact. The fleas start out tiny, insignificant. And then this accident happens and they become this huge city-altering force. It kind of speaks to how seemingly small actions or events can ripple outwards in unexpected ways.
That's a really good point. It's not just Cat Kid's big mistake. It's the fleas themselves embodying that idea from nothing to, well, Lord of the Fleas.
Exactly. It adds another layer to think about.
And speaking of layers, what about that meta-narrative itself? The whole George and Harold angle? How does that shape the reading experience?
Oh, it's brilliant. It adds so much humor. Their little comments in the captions, their arguments about how gross to make things.
Yeah, their fingerprints are all over it. The intentional misspellings, the sound effects like GLOP.
Totally. It constantly reminds you you're reading their version of the story. It makes it feel more playful, more authentic to their characters. We're kind of in on the joke with them.
It's such a unique way to tell a story, and it clearly worked, right? This book was huge.
Oh, massive. Lord of the Fleas was another smash hit for the series. Reviews were great. Kids loved it.
What were people praising most, do you recall?
I think it was that combination, really. The wild imagination of the plot, giant fleas, plus the reliable Pilkey humor, the laugh-out-loud moments, but also critics and even parents noticed those underlying themes we talked about, the responsibility, the bravery. It wasn't just silly.
Yeah, that seems to be the Dogman magic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It manages to be super entertaining, grab kids' attention, but also sneak in some gentle life lessons without feeling preachy.
Exactly. It delivers the fun, the action, the gross-out humor kids love, but there's substance there, too. It's that balance.
A tricky balance to get right, for sure.
And Pilkey nails it, especially through that George and Harold filter.
So, wrapping up our deep dive on Dogman, Lord of the Fleas, then, what are the main things that stand out for you?
For me, it's really how Pilkey uses such an outlandish, kind of disgusting premise.
Giant fleas.
Giant fleas. To explore really grounded themes, like taking ownership of your mistakes, even accidental ones, through Cat Kid, and finding courage when you're facing something that genuinely repulses you, like Dogman does. And doing it all with that signature humor, the slapstick, the visual gags, and that brilliant meta layer of George and Harold creating the whole thing. It's just a really smart, funny package.
Absolutely. It's a great reminder that maybe even the yuckiest problems can be tackled with, well, maybe some humor, and definitely with the determination to figure things out and take responsibility.
Which, kind of leads to a thought for our listeners. Think about the fleas in your own life.
Your everyday fleas.
Yeah, those little annoying things, the challenges or worries that maybe feel bigger than they are sometimes. Could looking at them through a Dogman lens, acknowledging the yuck, but finding the humor, taking responsibility for dealing with them, offer a different perspective.
Interesting. Like maybe even the stuff that makes us squirm can be faced down, maybe even with a bit of a laugh if we decide to own the solution.
Exactly. Maybe even the grossest problems aren't insurmountable. Okay, so you're here because you want to get smart, fast, right? Cut through the noise, get right to it.
That's the plan.
Good. Because today we're doing a deep dive into a book review. Specifically, Dogman, Brawl the Wild.
Right. The 6th book in the Dav Pilkey series, Dogman. Hugely popular.
Hugely. And what's interesting, what this review we're looking at points out, is that this one takes, well, a bit of a turn.
Yeah, it gets into some pretty relevant stuff, actually.
Yeah.
Timely.
Totally. The review highlights how this book, and remember, it's presented as a comic made by George and Harold from Captain Underpants.
Which is already meta and fun.
Exactly. But it dives into environmentalism and, what happens when humans mess with nature.
The consequences.
Right. So our mission today, unpack this review, pull out the key bits about the book's environmental themes, the story, how people reacted. Simple as that.
Let's do it. So the core conflict, according to the review.
Where's the start?
Well, the review identifies it as pretty classic, actually. Nature versus development. You've got a construction company, and they want to pave over the local forest.
Ah, the old paving paradise trope. For a shopping mall, right?
For a shopping mall, yeah. Standard stuff on the surface.
But the review says the impact is immediate, yeah. It's not just an abstract threat.
No, not at all. The review gives these, really vivid pictures. You've got angry squirrels literally throwing acorns at the construction crew.
Yeah. You can just see it. Proper little eco-warriors.
Totally. And then you have bears just wandering into the city, completely bewildered, lost.
Oh, wow. So it really throws everything off balance.
That's what the review emphasizes. This complete disruption of the habitat, pushing wildlife into the urban world where they just don't belong, it highlights that imbalance.
Makes you think, doesn't it, when your own, familiar places get disrupted?
For sure.
Yeah.
And that leads straight to Dogman himself.
Right. Because he's law enforcement. His job is, order, city order.
Exactly. Yeah. But the review points out this internal conflict he has. Big time. He's a cop, yes, but...
But he's also part dog.
Precisely. That inherent connection, those canine instincts. The review suggests he feels this deep empathy for the animals. He gets it.
So it's not just stop the crime, it's more complicated.
Much more. It forces him, the review says, to think beyond just arresting people.
Yeah.
He needs a different kind of solution here.
That's a tough spot when your job clashes with your nature, basically.
Definitely makes him a more complex character in this one.
Okay, so Dogman's torn. What about Petey, the cat? The review mentions him taking an odd turn. He's usually the bad guy, right?
Typically, yeah. Stirring up trouble. But the review notes this kind of evolution in his character. Maybe little Petey rubbing off on him.
Ah, okay.
And here, in this story, the review says he kind of emerges as, almost a voice of reason about the whole environmental mess.
Wait, Petey, a voice of reason on the environment?
Surprising, isn't it? That's what the review points out. He actually starts commenting on the impact.
Wow. Does the review, hint at why? Is he suddenly gone green?
Well, maybe not pure green. The review kind of suggests it might be more about, how the construction chaos could negatively affect everyone, including him.
Ah, self-preservation Petey style.
Perhaps. He even gives advice, apparently, though the review does say his advice isn't always the most practical.
That sounds more like Petey.
But still, this shift, this unexpected role, it adds another layer, makes him less predictable.
For sure. Okay, so environmental crisis, Dogman's dilemma, surprising Petey,
Yeah.
but still kid's book. It's got to be funny, right? The review mentions the humor.
Oh, absolutely, nonstop. The review highlights Pilkey's signature style is all there. The slapstick comedy, the visual gags.
Classic stuff.
Yeah, exaggerated faces, animals and humans in these completely chaotic, silly situations. Kids love it. Adults too, probably.
And the fliporamas, can't forget those. The review mentions them too.
Yep. Still part of the package. That interactive element right in the middle of all this environmental drama.
How does the review say they fit in? Just for fun?
Mostly for fun and engagement, yeah. But the review makes an interesting point. It says that even with all the laughs,
Yeah.
the book still gets across the animals' real distress. The humor doesn't totally erase the seriousness of their situation.
So the silliness maybe even highlights the problem in a weird way.
Kind of, yeah. The review suggests the absurdity might actually make the animal's plight more memorable. It's a balancing act.
That's smart. So it's not just random jokes. There's a point being woven through. What about the actual environmental message itself? How explicit is it, according to the review?
The review describes it as subtle, but definitely significant. It's not hitting you over the head, but it's there.
Okay.
It really focuses on the results of destroying habitats and how everything's connected, all living things.
Interconnectedness.
Exactly. And the review points out that the animals acting out, throwing acorns, wandering into town, that's a direct reminder of that connection being broken.
Right. Their desperation is the message.
Pretty much. Makes you think about, those ripple effects.
It does. And then there's that other layer, George and Harold. They're writing the comic. How does the review say that plays into the theme?
The meta-narrative. The review explains it adds, more humor, more engagement. George and Harold's take on the environmental stuff is, deliberately over the top.
As you'd expect from them.
Totally. And they try to include nature facts, but the review says that often hilariously wrong.
Oh, that's perfect. Squirrels throw acorns because they're practicing for baseball?
Something like that. The review doesn't give specifics, but you get the idea. It mentions their, deliberate bad grammar and kid-like language, too.
Yeah.
It reinforces that it's their version of the story.
Yeah.
It's a clever way to frame these serious ideas through their innocent, slightly confused perspective.
So it works on two levels. The story itself and George and Harold messing it up slightly.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did all this land? What does the review say about the reception for Brawl of the Wild? Was it well received?
Generally, yes. Very positive, according to the review. People praise this story, naturally. The humor, but also specifically how it handled this serious topic in a funny way. and that subtle environmental message we talked about.
So it didn't feel too preachy.
Apparently not. The review suggests readers and critics really appreciated that it could entertain kids, make them laugh, but also, gently raise their awareness about conservation, respecting nature.
That's a tricky balance to strike. Sounds like Pilkey nailed it.
Seems like it, based on this review, found that sweet spot between fun and meaning.
All right, so wrapping up this deep dive into the review, what are the big takeaways on Man Brawl the Wild?
Well, I think the review makes it clear this book is more than just superhero dog antics. It uses all that great Pilkey humor and storytelling to actually explore some pretty important themes. Environmentalism, habitat loss, how we need to find a way to sort of live alongside nature.
It's kind of amazing, really, a kid's comic book, presented like that, getting into this stuff.
It really is. It shows that even these seemingly simple stories can pack a punch, offer real insights.
Definitely gives you something to think about, which leads us to our final thought.
Yeah, the review talks about this specific forest and mall, but it makes you think, doesn't it, about the smaller things.
Like in our own neighborhoods.
Exactly. Even small developments, things we might not think twice about. How do they affect the local wildlife, the patch of green down the road? What's our part in, keeping that balance?
What is our responsibility there? Definitely something to chew on.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So, today we're jumping into a really popular one, Man, For Whom the Ball Rolls.
That's right, the 7th book in Dav Pilkey's series. Big stuff for kids and honestly adults too.
Definitely. And our main lens for this, our source, is a pretty insightful book review.
Yeah, it helps us kind of unpack things.
Exactly. Our mission here isn't just to say what happens. We want to dig deeper,
Get under the skin of it.
Right. Unearth the key themes in this Man book. Why does it resonate? What's it saying about, say, change or technology connection? All wrapped up in this really funny package.
It's amazing how Pilkey does that. So the premise, it's presented as another comic by George and Harold from Captain Underpants.
Always a fun framing device.
Totally. And it kicks off with Man and Lil Petey, Cat Kid, just doing their thing, but then their routine gets, disrupted.
By the ball, the self-rolling ball.
Yes. Invented by Chief's robot helper. The idea is, endless fetch for Man. Non-stop fun.
Sounds like canine heaven, doesn't it? Initially, anyway.
And the review says he is initially overjoyed. Just loves it. Constant fetch, no effort needed from anyone else.
But that feeling doesn't stick around, does it? According to the review.
No, it doesn't. That's where it gets interesting. The review points out that the novelty, it fades.
And he's left feeling, what? Kind of empty?
Yeah, exactly. Emptiness, longing. It highlights this really interesting conflict.
Between what? The tech convenience and something else.
Yeah, between that easy, automated fun and genuine interaction, real connection.
Okay. So the ball gives him fetch, but it takes away the person playing fetch with him.
Precisely. The review really nailed that. It's the shared activity he's missing, not just the retrieving.
That makes a lot of sense. Meanwhile, there's a whole other subplot brewing, right? With Lil Petey.
Oh, yes, Little Petey. He gets inspired by the ball, too, but in a different way.
How so?
He decides he's going to make a movie about the ball.
A movie? Oh, boy. Knowing Lil Petey.
Right. The review describes his filmmaking attempts as hilariously chaotic, lots of mishaps, maybe some accidental explosions.
Classic. So is there a theme there, too?
Yeah.
In his movie Chaos?
Well, the review suggests it touches on perseverance, maybe, and just the messy, unpredictable nature of trying to create something.
Yeah. Art isn't always neat, trial and error.
Absolutely. And it's played for laughs, but it's relatable. Anyone who's tried to make something, it can get a bit wild.
For sure. And speaking of laughs, we can't ignore the humor. The review stresses Pilkey's signature style.
Oh, definitely. The slapstick, the visual gags. It's classic Pilkey.
His exaggerated faces, the silly situations.
And the review highlights the art style itself, doesn't it? How it contributes.
Right, the George and Harold style. Intentionally simple, kind of rough.
Exactly. But super expressive. It's not meant to be polished. It's meant to feel energetic, immediate. It boosts the comedy and the emotion somehow.
And the flipperamas. Gotta mention those.
Yes. The review points those out as key interactive bits. They're not just fluff. They actually make the action feel more dynamic.
Such a clever little invention for a book.
It really is. Pulls the reader right in.
Okay, so beyond the humor and the art, the review points to deeper themes. Adapting to change was one you mentioned.
Yeah, that's central. Dogman's whole routine is upended by this ball. He has to adjust.
And that connects to us too, right? How we deal with new things, new tech.
Totally. The review kind of nudges us to think about that. Do we jump right in? Do we push back? Or find some middle ground?
Finding a balance seems important here, because the review also really emphasizes genuine connection.
Over the tech substitute, yeah. Dogman has the endless fetch, but he's missing his friends, the interaction.
It's a subtle warning, maybe, about prioritizing convenience over real relationships.
I think the review suggests, yeah, it makes you think, what are we potentially losing when we automate everything? Are we missing the joy of, throwing the ball ourselves, metaphorically speaking?
That's a great point. It's food for thought from a kid's book. Now, the review also talks about the meta stuff, George and Harold being the authors.
Right. That adds such a funny layer. The review mentions their commentary, their exaggerated reactions to the story's emotional bits.
Like they're surprised by the feelings in their own story.
Kind of. And they try to make Lil Petey's movie more dramatic. It's all part of the fun.
And the language reflects them too, right? The review notes the deliberate grammar mistakes, the kid-like voice.
It constantly reminds you this is filtered through their perspective. Energetic, a little chaotic, maybe not perfectly spelled.
The review sees that as part of the charm, making it feel informal and accessible.
Yeah, it's a smart technique. It avoids feeling preachy, even when touching on deeper themes.
So how did the book actually do when it came out? Was the reception good?
Oh, very good, according to the review. Lots of positive buzz.
What did critics like?
The review says they praised the story, obviously the humor, but also how it managed to weave in those themes, change, friendship, without losing the fun.
So it hit that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Entertaining, but also meaningful.
Exactly. It was seen as really well balanced, fun for kids, but with substance that adults could appreciate too.
So overall, the review concludes, it's a worthy addition.
Yeah, a thoughtful and entertaining one. Uses a simple idea, the ball, to explore some complex stuff and really reinforces friendship, finding joy in the old and the new.
That sounds like a pretty strong endorsement.
It does. The review paints it as a book that delivers on multiple levels. Silly fun, but also reflection.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways the review offers us?
Well, I think the main thing, drawing from the review, is that For Whom the Ball Rolls is more than just laughs.
Right. More than Flipperama.
Exactly. It gives us this surprisingly sharp look at our relationship with technology versus connection, human connection or, canine connection.
The idea that new stuff is cool, but maybe shouldn't replace the real deal.
Pretty much. The review suggests it champions shared experiences, genuine bonds, and it doesn't shy away from showing that change can be tricky, but also bring opportunities.
And for listeners, maybe the takeaway is, well, reflecting on that balance in their own lives.
I think so. The review sort of prompts that. This simple Dogman story makes you consider, where does tech serve you, and where might it be maybe isolating you a bit?
Where's the convenience versus the connection?
Right. Which leads to that final thought the review kind of leaves us with.
Go on.
Well, considering Dogman finds more joy in connection than in that perfect, endless, solitary game, the review implicitly asks, what are the self-rolling balls in our lives?
The conveniences that keep us from
What?
engaging more directly?
Yeah, engaging with people, with the world. What might we be missing out on by chasing that perfectly automated experience instead of, just throwing the damn ball ourselves sometimes?
That is definitely something to chew on. A surprisingly deep question sparked by Dogman.
It really is. Pilkey packs a lot in there. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be diving in.
So you sent us some really interesting source material excerpts describing Dogman Fetch 22. That's the 8th book in Dav Pilkey's series, right?
That's the one. Hugely popular series.
And, at first glance, someone might think, okay, a kid's comic book.
Right. What are we going to find here?
Exactly. But honestly, looking through these descriptions, there's a surprising amount about learning, about rehabilitation, even changing how you see things.
Absolutely. Themes that are relevant way beyond just kids' literature. It touches on personal growth, how people learn, stuff anyone can relate to.
And we should mention the setup, the whole thing is framed as a comic made by George and Harold from Captain Underpants.
Yeah, which immediately signals that unique, very humorous style. It's part of the charm.
It really is. It sets a certain tone right from the start.
And it's fascinating how Pilkey uses that, uses this, very accessible format to explore some pretty deep ideas about education, motivation.
It shows how powerful storytelling can be, doesn't it? Regardless of the audience.
Definitely. These ideas about why we do things presented this way, they can really stick with you.
Okay, so let's get into the core of it from these excerpts. This thing called the Supa Buddies Retreatee. The descriptions mention Chief, a character in the series, starts this program. What's the goal here?
Well, the idea behind the retreatee, as it comes across, is it's specifically for characters who haven't always been, let's say, the most well-behaved.
Okay, like a rehabilitation effort.
Sort of, yeah. A place to maybe learn some new skills, change their ways. And a key figure involved is Petey the cat.
Ah, Petey. Often the antagonist, right?
Often, yes. So his involvement is significant, and the whole thing feels very experimental, unconventional.
Yeah.
Not your standard classroom setup.
Right. And Petey's role in this, the excerpts paint a picture of him being pretty reluctant at first, skeptical even.
Very skeptical, which I think is really interesting. Taps into something real about learning, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, we often bring our own baggage, our own, preconceived notions to new experiences, especially learning experiences. Petey definitely does. He's not buying into this whole positive change idea initially.
He's resistant.
Totally. But the narrative seems to show that even with that resistance, the environment, the experiences, they start to seep in.
Ah, so it's not an overnight switch.
Not at all. It's gradual, maybe subtle. He might still be cynical, but he's engaging. He's being affected. It shows learning can be messy, and resistance is often part of that process.
That makes sense. You can't just flip a switch into someone's head.
Exactly.
Now, the excerpts also mention Lil Petey Cat Kid. His learning seems different.
Oh, completely different. He's kind of the opposite model in a way.
How's his approach described?
His learning is driven purely by curiosity, by just wanting to figure things out. He experiments, he explores.
Sounds a bit chaotic, maybe?
It can be. There are probably some comical mishaps mentioned, but it highlights that intrinsic motivation, that inner drive.
So learning because you want to know, not because you're told to learn.
Precisely. His journey underlines the importance of just letting curiosity run wild sometimes. It can be super effective, even if it's not structured like the retreatee.
Interesting contrast there. Okay, and we can't talk about Dogman without talking about the humor. It's central.
Absolutely central. Dav Pilkey's signature style, slapstick, visual gags.
Yeah, the exaggerated faces, the silly situations. How does that humor connect to the themes of learning, do you think?
Well, I think the humor does more than just entertain. It actually makes the underlying messages more accessible.
How so? Like it makes it less intimidating.
Kinda, yeah. When ideas are wrapped in comedy, you're often more open to them. They don't feel preachy. And the style itself are simple drawings by George and Harold.
Right, intentionally childlike.
Exactly. And the flipporamas, those are mentioned too. They're interactive.
Oh, yeah. Those add a physical element.
Right. They physically demonstrate change, action. It visually reinforces the whole idea of transformation and learning in a really dynamic, fun way. It shows things aren't fixed.
So the humor isn't just for laughs. It actually serves the themes. It makes the ideas about, say, rehabilitation less heavy.
Precisely. It lowers your defenses, maybe, allows you to absorb these ideas about challenging assumptions without feeling lectured.
Let's talk more about that rehabilitation and challenging assumptions. How does Fetch 22 seem to handle that?
It does it quite subtly, I think, by taking someone like Petey, who has this established role, this history.
Your typical bad guy, in simple terms.
Right. And putting him in this setting, focused on positive change, it automatically makes you, the reader, question your own assumptions about him. Can he change?
And the narrative suggests, maybe.
It suggests the potential is there. You see these glimpses of development, even through his cynicism. It sends a powerful message, especially for a young audience, that people aren't just one thing.
That change is possible, even for unexpected people.
Exactly. And that maybe giving people chances, opportunities to learn is crucial. Don't write people off based on their past.
And what about the meta part? George and Harold making the comic. How does that layer play into it?
Oh, it's brilliant. It adds this layer of self-awareness. It keeps things light.
Because George and Harold have their own unique take on things.
Definitely unique.
Thank you.
Their view of education, their attempts at being educational are often played for laughs. It creates this humorous distance.
So the book can talk about serious ideas without being too serious?
Exactly. And their voice, the intentional grammatical errors, the slightly skewed perspective, it constantly reminds you you're reading something created by kids. It maintains that playful tone throughout.
Keeps it charming.
Yeah, it's a really clever narrative device.
Okay, and the reception. The excerpts mentioned the book was well received. What stood out to reviewers?
It sounds like people really responded to a few key things. The storyline, obviously engaging, fast-paced. The humor, naturally, was a big plus.
Always is with Pilkey.
But also that surprising depth. The way it tackled education, rehabilitation, character growth without being heavy-handed.
People noticed the underlying messages.
They did. And Petey's arc, his relationship with the little Petey's, seemed to resonate. It struck that balance. Entertaining, funny, but also meaningful and kind of heartwarming, promoting positive change in a non-preachy way.
So wrapping this part up, if we boil down what these excerpts from Dogman, Fetch 22, tell us in our deep dive today, what's the core insight about learning and growth?
I think the main takeaway is how this seemingly simple kids comic offers really valuable perspectives on how transformation happens.
Right. Even in unlikely places.
Yeah. It uses this unusual setup, the retreatee, to show learning isn't one size fits all. It can be structured, unstructured, met with enthusiasm like Dogman's or with resistance like Petey's.
But change is still possible.
That seems to be the message. Petey's slow, maybe reluctant journey alongside Dogman's optimism. It suggests growth can happen for anyone if the conditions are right, if the approach connects somehow.
It's ultimately a story about the power of education in a broad sense.
I'd say so. The power of learning, positive influence, and the potential for change that exists, well, potentially in everyone.
It really shows you can find these complex ideas anywhere if you look closely.
Absolutely. And, even though it's framed for kids, these ideas dealing with resistance, the spark of curiosity, the impact of environment, they apply just as much to us, to adults, to how we learn and change throughout our lives.
A surprisingly profound deep dive, then, from an unexpected source.
I agree. A great reminder that valuable insights can pop up where you least expect them.
So for you, listening, here's something to think about as you go about your day. Try to recall a time, maybe for you, maybe someone you know, when there was a moment of real learning or a shift in a belief that was unexpected.
A genuine aha moment, or maybe a slow dawning realization.
Great. What was going on around that time? What circumstances made that change, that learning possible? And think about it. Could any of the things we talked about from Fetch 22, like maybe a different kind of approach or just a supportive space, could that have been part of it?
Definitely something worth reflecting on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Okay, so for today's deep dive, we're taking a slightly unexpected path. We're setting aside the usual academic papers for a moment, and instead we're diving into, believe it or not, Man Grime and Punishment.
Right, the kids' comic, Dav Pilkey. It's the 9th one in the series, I think.
That's the one. And I know, maybe sounds a bit strange, Man, and, serious environmental themes.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, how sometimes these seemingly simple stories for kids can actually reflect some pretty big real-world stuff.
Exactly, and that's what we want to explore. Because this book, while definitely funny, I mean, it is Dav Pilkey.
Yeah, creator of Captain Underpants, you expect the laughs.
Right, but it actually presents this scenario where the main city is just, drowning in garbage. Literally.
Piles and piles of it.
We're talking huge mountains of trash, the air stinks, the water's polluted. It's genuinely grim.
And the way it's shown, even though it's cartoony, it taps into real anxieties, doesn't it? About waste, consumption, where does all our stuff go?
Totally. It makes you think about real waste management problems. And in the book, it gets even weirder.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the pollution isn't just sitting there. It actually creates these grime monsters.
Grime monsters. Okay, that's definitely Pilkey. Animated trash.
Pretty much living piles of junk causing chaos. It sounds silly, but it's actually a really vivid picture of the consequences of letting pollution get out of control.
That's a clever narrative device, actually. It makes the environmental damage, which can feel a bit abstract sometimes, into, a literal monster to fight.
Exactly.
Cool.
Tangible. So you see this awful situation, these monsters,
yeah,
and you wonder, how did it get this bad?
Right. What's the source? Is it some evil corporation, like in some stories?
Well, that's what's interesting. The book doesn't really point to one big villain for the pollution itself. It traces it back to more everyday things.
Like what?
Like widespread littering, people just not disposing of their trash properly. It's shown as this buildup, this cumulative effect of lots of small, careless actions.
Okay. So it's less about one bad guy and more about, everyone. Collective negligence.
Sort of, yeah. It's a subtle message, but it's there. How lots of little bits of litter add up to this huge, monstrous problem, which connects directly to the real world, you know?
Absolutely. That idea of shared responsibility. It's often the small, seemingly insignificant choices made by many that lead to the big environmental headaches.
Precisely. And guess who's really bothered by this whole smelly situation?
Gotta be Dog Man, right? With the super sensitive nose.
You got it. The stench is driving him crazy. But true to form, he doesn't back down. He sees this pollution, these grime monsters, as a threat to the city he needs to stop.
So his role as protector expands then. It's not just catching burglars, it's tackling environmental threats too.
Yeah, it shows that protecting your community also means protecting its environment, its health.
That's a good point. And is he fighting this alone?
Mostly. But surprisingly, even Petey gets involved.
Yeah.
You know, the cat. Usually pretty cynical and self-absorbed.
Petey. Huh. He actually cares about the garbage problem.
Seems like it. Maybe the sheer scale of the mess, the stink, gets to him too. It suggests the problem is so big it kind of affects everyone, even the grumpy ones.
That makes sense. If your whole city is turning into a dump, it's hard to ignore.
Right. And he even teams up a bit with little Petey, Cat Kid.
Oh, Cat Kid. He's always enthusiastic. Trying to use science, I bet.
Yeah, exactly. He tries to figure out the science behind the grime, though, you know, it's often pretty funny and maybe not totally accurate.
Oh, but their involvement, even if it's humorous, it shows different kinds of characters engaging with the issue, right? Makes it relatable.
Definitely. And the humor is key throughout. Pilkey uses all his usual slapstick, those crazy visual gags.
Giant, googly-eyed trash heaps, I imagine.
Things like that, yeah. And really ridiculous attempts to clean it up. Plus, those drawings. The ones that are supposed to be by George and Harold.
Oh, yeah, the intentionally simple, kid-like art style.
Just adds to the charm, makes the whole messy situation somehow funnier, more approachable.
That visual comedy is crucial, isn't it? Especially for kids. It takes a serious topic like pollution and makes it less daunting, more memorable, maybe.
And you still get the fliporamas.
Yeah.
Even with all the grime, there are those interactive flipbook bits.
Of course. Gotta have the fliporamas. It keeps it fun, keeps kids engaged while they're absorbing this underlying message.
And that message, underneath all the jokes and monsters, it's really about, well, basic stuff.
Yeah.
Recycling, putting trash where it belongs.
And the consequences when we don't.
Yeah, and it loops back to that idea we mentioned, collective responsibility. Taking care of the environment is like everyone's job.
And it delivers that without being preachy, which is probably why it works so well. It connects actions to outcomes in a clear, simple way. Empowers kids, maybe, to think about their own part.
Totally. And then there's that whole other layer, the fact that George and Harold are supposedly making this comic book.
Right, the meta-narrative.
Their commentary, their like exaggerated reactions to how gross everything is. There's sometimes totally wrong facts.
Yeah.
Adds so much humor.
Yeah, the slightly broken grammar, the kid logic. It all frames the serious topic in this really lighthearted, accessible way.
And clearly it worked. The book got great reviews, didn't it? People seemed to really appreciate how it blended the fun with talking about something important.
Yeah, the reception was really positive. Critics pointed out that ability to entertain while, raising awareness about pollution and responsibility.
It really shows how children's media can effectively introduce quite complex ideas, like environmental stewardship.
Definitely. Engaging kids early on, getting them thinking about these things in a way that's not scary, but is still meaningful.
That's powerful.
So, pulling it all together, what's the big takeaway from diving into Dogman's garbage crisis?
Well, I think it's that even sources we might dismiss as just silly entertainment can hold pretty valuable insights.
Right. This book uses humor, adventure, even talking trash monsters.
To actually explore serious themes of environmental responsibility, the impact of our actions, and why we all need to chip in.
Yeah. It shows how individual choices, good or bad, add up. It's a great example of embedding a message about collective impact within a really engaging story.
Exactly. So that leaves us with a final thought for everyone listening. Thinking about this story, how might we look at the grime in our own worlds?
And not just literal trash, maybe, but other kinds of mess, wasteful habits, maybe overlooking things in our community.
Right. Could we tackle some of that with a similar sense of responsibility? Maybe even find some unexpected partners in cleaning things up, like Dogman and Petey.
It's a good question. What piece of grime, big or small, could you maybe start tackling today?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping straight into a series that, well, it just keeps delivering, doesn't it? Dav Pilkey's Dogman. Mothering Heights.
Yeah, number 10 in the series. It's amazing.
And we always have to remember, these aren't just comics. They're supposedly written by George Beard and Harold Hutchins from Captain Underpants.
Right, which gives it that whole playful meta thing going on. It's part of the charm.
Totally. But what's really interesting, I think, is how these kind of simple-looking books tackle some surprisingly deep emotional stuff.
Exactly. So our mission today isn't just to, walk through the plot. It's really to dig into Mothering Heights. What's going on beneath the surface? What makes it more than just funny?
Right. And the absolute core of this one, the big hook, is Dogman and Lil Petey finding an abandoned kitten.
Which is wild because they're already such an unconventional pair,
Oh, absolutely. A former cop with a dog's head and his sort of reformed clone son cat. It's already a unique household.
Definitely not your average family sitcom setup. So adding this tiny helpless kitten, it really throws a wrench in the works, but in a good way.
So let's talk about that dynamic first.
Yeah.
Dogman and Lil Petey. What was their baseline before the kitten arrived?
Well, it's this blend of Dogman's, boundless enthusiasm and loyalty, sometimes causing chaos, and Lil Petey's intelligence, but also his maybe lingering cynicism.
Yeah.
He's come a long way, but he's still Petey's clone.
Yeah, exactly. There's still that edge. So then this kitten shows up, completely vulnerable.
And suddenly it's not just about them navigating their own weird relationship. There's this other being that totally depends on them.
And the title Mothering Heights obviously points to Dogman taking on this caregiving role, a dog mothering a kitten. It's inherently funny, right?
It is, and the book plays with that. Dogman's attempts are often clumsy, driven by his dog brain, maybe.
Like, does he try to bury the kitten? Or bring it a squeaky toy?
Haha, maybe. But it's always well-intentioned. It's this fascinating mix of his canine side and his, human-ish empathy and desire to protect.
Yeah, you really see him trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but his heart's in the right place.
And that's kind of the point, isn't it? It challenges what we think of as mothering or caregiving. It's not about species, necessarily.
Right. It's about the intent, the affection, even if the execution is a bit dog-like.
Exactly. It pushes against those traditional boundaries.
Okay, so what about Lil Petey? How does he react to this tiny newcomer? He wasn't exactly Mr. Warm and Fuzzy to begin with.
No, definitely not. And you kind of expect him to be maybe annoyed or just, indifferent at first.
Yeah, great, another thing making noise.
Right. But what's interesting is watching his empathy sort of bloom. Maybe that's too strong a word, but you see cracks in the grumpy facade.
How so? What does he do?
Well, he observes Dogman. He sees the effort, the tenderness, even if it's awkward. And maybe he offers a little help, reluctantly at first.
So the kitten's vulnerability kind of forces him to engage emotionally.
I think so. It's like when you're faced with something so utterly helpless, it's hard for even someone like Lil Petey to stay completely detached. It taps into something deeper.
It's like the kitten holds up a mirror, maybe, showing him a capacity for care he didn't know or didn't want to admit he had.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He's learning, growing, just by being around this situation. He's part of the household, so the kitten's fate is tied to his in a way.
And all this plays out with Pilkey's signature style, right?
Huh.
The reviews mentioned heartwarming and humorous episodes.
Oh, totally. You still get the crazy action, the silly villains, the slapstick. That's the Dogman DNA.
Can't have Dogman without some Supa Buddies chaos.
Exactly. But woven into that are these genuinely sweet moments. Dogman trying to comfort the kitten, Lil Petey maybe sharing a toy. It balances the humor.
And the art, the George and Harold style, really helps with that balance, I think.
It does. It's intentionally simple, right? But those big eyes, the expressive lines, they convey a surprising amount of emotion without being overly complex.
Oh, yeah, the kitten's eyes alone. They just scream vulnerability.
Then you have the fliporamas, which are always fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do they play into the mothering theme here?
Well, they often underscore those moments of connection. You flip the page and you see Dogman being gentle, or maybe Lil Petey doing something unexpectedly kind for the kitten. It makes those small actions feel dynamic.
It's like a little animated moment of tenderness.
Yeah.
Super effective.
Yeah, it really lands those emotional beats in a way that fits the book's style.
So this all builds towards these bigger themes, right? Family, belonging, acceptance. Seems like this installment really leans into those.
Absolutely. I mean, the foundation was already there with Dogman and Lil Petey, this unlikely pair. The kitten just dials it up.
It really hammers home that idea that family isn't just about biology or, who you're supposed to be with.
Exactly. It can be found or maybe made in the most unexpected places. Here you have a dog man, a cat clone, and a kitten forming this little unit.
And the bonds they form, based purely on care and affection, they just cut across all those differences, species, background, everything.
It shows that what truly matters is that willingness to connect, to care for each other. That's what defines their family.
And the fact the kitten was abandoned, that feels key.
It really is. It creates this immediate need, this vacuum of belonging. And Dogman and Lil Petey, in their own ways, step up. It's a catalyst for exploring that compassion.
Okay, but we can't forget the George and Harold layer. How does their authorship affect how we read these themes?
Well, it adds this layer of, like, sincerity almost. Their commentary, their little notes in the margins, their sometimes over-the-top reaction.
They add more explosions or whatever.
Right. It reminds you this is being filtered through a kid's perspective. They see these themes of love and family as important, even if they express it in a goofy way.
And the language they use? The intentional misspellings, the run-on sentences?
Yeah, that whole childlike voice emphasizes their perspective. It makes the emotional stuff feel more genuine, somehow less preachy. Plus, like you said, it keeps it funny.
It stops it from getting too heavy, keeps that light touch even when dealing with, abandonment and finding family.
Precisely. It's that classic Pilkey magic serious themes wrapped in undeniable fun.
So, wrapping things up a bit, thinking about the book's reception, it was really positive, wasn't it?
Overwhelmingly so. I think people really responded to that mix of humor and genuine heart. It clearly struck a chord.
What do you think the biggest takeaway is, if you had to boil Mothering Heights down?
I think it's that message about the unexpected ways family can form, and that love and acceptance, they don't really have boundaries, not species, not background, none of that.
Yeah. It's defined by the care you show, Dogman being a mother, Lil Petey finding his softer side. It all points to that. Family is about love, period.
It's a beautiful message, honestly, and Pilkey delivers it without ever feeling like he's lecturing. It just emerges naturally from the story.
Leaves you feeling good, but also makes you think a little bit, maybe.
Definitely.
So, for a final thought then, maybe consider the unexpected families out there in the world. Bonds between different species like we see here, or maybe human connections that don't fit the traditional mold.
Right. What can we learn from them?
Yeah.
About care, about connection.
Exactly. What do these unconventional bonds teach us about acceptance and, well, just plain love?
It's a good question. Sometimes looking at things through a simpler lens, like children's literature, can actually offer some pretty profound insights into that stuff, things we might overlook otherwise.